Hello, Chattanooga Film Festival. This is Nathan from Video Monsters Podcast, the podcast that takes movies seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. And I am super excited to be talking to Bari Kang, the writer, director, producer, actor. You probably also did craft services. You were probably also playing the music in the background, but basically the jack of all trades for Itch, which just screened on the virtual side of CFF. Thank you so much for being here, Bari.
Well, thank you for having me here, and big thanks to Chattanooga Film Festival for including Itch in this year's program.
Yeah, it is a great film, and I'm so glad that people have a chance to watch it. And I'm super excited to be doing the Q&A because I love this movie. But let's just start with what prompted you to start your foray into horror.
So, yeah, it was, like many great things, it was kind of born out of frustration. I never thought I would do a horror film. I just didn't think that was my my niche or my forte. I don't even watch that many horror films until now. Everything has changed now. But my first two films were crime thrillers, a very competitive space, especially when you're working with smaller budgets. You're competing with name actors and name directors, and crime thrillers and suspense films are really vehicles driven by star power, whether it's in front of the camera or behind the camera. And you can make a great film, which we thought we did in the last couple of films, but it's very hard to find an audience. And then God bless her, my wife Monica, who actually probably did all the work on Itch. She wore all those hats that you were talking about. She's my partner in crime, partner in life, and my partner in making films. And she said, "Hey, you got to do a horror. You got to do a horror. People love horror." And I was like, "I don't know. I'm not a horror guy, And then after our last film, The Scrapper, COVID hit. The Scrapper came out during COVID, and we were kind of sitting around. And she was, for lack of a better word, just pestering me about making a horror film. And I was like, look, I have no ideas for horror. I'm a Tarantino, Scorsese, De Palma kind of guy, crime thrillers, mob, and all that stuff. But then something happened. So the store is my store, is our family store. Mm-hmm. And that scene with the customer, something like that actually happened in the store, where we had this crazy, wild customer just coming, scratching herself and just going nuts. And I was like, "Hey man, you got bed bugs. You need to get out of my store." But that sat with me, and because it's, as a filmmaker, you see stuff and you're like, "Oh, that could be a movie." And I guess the timing was right with Monica in my ear about the horror film and me wanting to do something different. I said, okay, this could be something. And the idea was to do a short film. But then I started writing it, and it just started morphing into this darker exploration of my own fears and my own insecurities of being a young dad. What would I do if I lost my wife? Oh my God, this and that. And I was like, oh, okay, now it's kind of turning into my kind of film as well. And it just blew up into a feature screenplay. And I just had a blast writing it, man. It was so different than writing the other films. It was just great. So that's what kind of got me into this space.
Mm. Yeah, and you talk about how you hadn't done horror before, and you're like, "Oh no, what am I going to do?" I've not really done much horror, but you did something incredibly right that a lot of people tend to miss with horror. You focused on the characters. You gave me characters that I cared about, that I was invested in. You gave multiple layers to them, to where there's not really any bad guys in the movie. There's plenty of, I understand what they're doing, even if what they're doing is terrible. And just that constant switching between who you're rooting for and who you understandably maybe want to get the itch. And then when they get it, like, oh God, no, I don't actually want that on anyone. And so that investment on the characters really got me invested, because I actually cared what happened to them. And it was really reminiscent of movies like The Mist and Monster, where it is about this dynamic, and the threat is just this thing forcing these interactions and these dynamics. So what helped you keep that balance on those characters? As you were writing it and then subsequently directing it, How did you keep the balance between we care about these characters,
Yeah.
but also here's this horrible threat?
So I think my weakness that I thought I had became my strength. So when I say, "Oh, I didn't know horror," I was talking. I guess I was talking more about the plot and kind of paying homage to everything. But I think my strength building up over the years was characters. Because even my last two films, I was very interested in what drove the characters. So I think that naturally just happened. In this film, is my focus. Once I realized what kind of film I was trying to make, with kind of a different take on the virus zombie. I don't want to give too much away, but
But I was thinking about that as well, as far as like how far
yeah,
into spoilers do we get? But I'm operating under the assumption that everyone watching this has
right.
already watched it.
True, true,
So
true, 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 true.
if you're
Right,
watching the
right, right, right.
Q&A before the
Yeah,
movie,
yeah,
stop
exactly.
now, watch it, and then come back.
Yeah, so I always focus on characters. For me, if the characters aren't real and if we're not invested in the characters, I then it's just an exercise in making a film, an emotionless film, and that's not what I wanted to do. And then I'm starting to realize that yeah, the best horror films do focus on the characters, and even the monster or the infection or the virus becomes a character. I even treated the space as a character with like the different rooms and how each one has like a different vibe, a different
Mm.
emotion. So for me, and then again, coming back to the fact that, it's not a Hollywood production and we're so limited, you're always so limited in the scope of what you can do and what you can't do, that the characters and the emotions become that much more important. So if you can get people caring about everyone, you have to show less. You have to you can do less and show less and really get a bigger punch out of it when you do something.
Mm.
And so that was always in my mind. And then I guess the challenging aspect was hitting those beats that horror films need to hit to keep people going, And I think we did a good job balancing all of those things.
Yeah, and you talked about how this was built off of some of your own personal fears of
Yeah.
what would you do if you lost your daughter, and I can very much relate to that. A few years ago on the podcast, we did personal fears, where my fear as a new dad was, what if I royally screw up and just completely destroy my son's life?
Yeah.
My co-host's fear was, what if my son dies? And so we did back-to-back series of that. And so I really connected with this story on a very emotional level. And at times it was gut-wrenching. And by the end, like I was practically sobbing. So what was it like for you to have your own daughter in that role? Like how cathartic or how traumatic was it to go through that experience of addressing
Yeah.
those fears in real life through the movie?
It was interesting. I went through a lot of it during the writing process. So being the writer, I found myself weeping sometimes, not just for my scenes, not just for my character. Yeah, I do too much. So I also played Jay, and then my daughter plays Olivia. And during the writing process, I would find so my thing was, okay, if I'm crying, that's good. If I can get myself to cry when I want people to feel something, that means it's working. And so I went through a lot of that during the writing, and it was pretty intense, and that's always fun. And then Olivia was cast out of necessity again. I didn't write it for her, honestly. But I wanted to make the film, and I decided to make it during the strikes
Mhm.
because I knew people would be available. And but casting a child is very hard, when you have a smaller film. And I knew I couldn't take certain risks that I could with my own kid. And then I also knew it would be that much easier for me to just get to where I need to get to. So she was really cast out of necessity, and I knew she was up to par because she's a performer. She's not an actor. She hasn't acted before, but she's performed, in front of an audience, whether it's piano or ballet or gymnastics. So she had that in her, and so that was the kind of my little test: can she get in front of the camera and just maintain her composure? And then to answer your question, I think she was a little frightened in the beginning. I threw her in the deep end. So I did the probably her hardest scene, which was the axe scene. But that was the first scene I did, and she was so that reaction where we that when we cut to her after the axe scene, that's her real reaction. We had to stop after that because she was totally freaked out because
I wonder why.
yeah. But then after that, she was all giggles because she realized, oh, this is like pretend play, you know. And
Mm.
then she was like, but we're just pretending. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. But I needed you to be real in that one moment for sure. And then after that, it was kind of an exercise in getting her to stop laughing. So she had a blast. And then I did keep her away from all of the stuff that I knew she's too young for. She hasn't seen the film yet. She was never there in some of the in all the other bloody scenes. And then the scene with her in the end really kicked my ass when I'm just telling her that I can't be with her. That killed me. Like I didn't think I was gonna be crying in that scene. I never planned on crying in that scene, but I just lost myself, and I get snot fucking coming out of my mouth and out of my nose, and and Monica's like, "You look like shit," and my DP's like, "No, snot is good." So I was like, I guess we'll keep it, So yeah, it was pretty intense. It was pretty intense, and then looking back on it, it's probably one of the best experiences I'll ever have with Olivia. I mean, sharing that experience, going through that, and then seeing the product and just reminiscing, it's totally worth it. She was very proud of the film, as am I. And my son's waiting for his. He walks around auditioning for me as a zombie. Look, Dad, I can be a zombie. I was like, yeah, I'm sure.
Well, there you go. Next one could just be kid zombies.
Yeah.
Well, that emotional connection, and again, caring about the characters, and dear God, the ending of this movie, I already likened it to The Mist and Monster, but the ending scene reminded me of Watership Down when the Bright Eyes song is playing,
Yeah.
and it's just like, oh God, I miss my kids. Like, and once I finish watching this, straight to my kids and give them hugs. I love you guys so much.
Oh,
All right,
that's great
I
to
gotta go be
hear.
responsible now.
That's really good to hear because yeah, the endings are always tough, man. Uh, I definitely wanted it to be devastating, and then I was wondering, do I go away like the mist,
Yeah.
and totally kind of pull the rug out? But then I didn't think I needed to do that, and I'm glad that it's working the way it is because it leaves some things open.
Mhm. Yeah, and even though it is very dark, it's also a very optimistic ending. So
Yeah,
with caring about the characters, again, this is also at times a very bloody horror movie, and some of the horror gets almost body horror at times, which I love. I love
yeah.
body
The
horror.
funny thing is, that never entered my mind. Actually, body horror is a subgenre on its own, and funny enough, I never thought of it. I never thought about that. And
Mhm.
but now looking back, I'm like, oh, totally, totally. There's definitely a body horror film as well because
Well,
there's that fear, the fear, and some people have an issue with that, and it's crazy.
yeah, so talk a little bit about why the decision to have the horror coming from the inside. Like it is an internal source of horror, even though it is people who get the
Yeah,
itch. It is a very internalized threat, and I also love the fact that it's not like a typical zombie movie where they get bit, they turn into a zombie, they're brain dead. I love that you see people struggle to try to maintain
yeah.
composure.
So the way I thought of it was, everyone's got an itch about something. So yes, physically it's an itch. You can get this virus and you can't help but scratching yourself and others until you're dead, and then you become a scratching machine. But there's a part where you're like trying to stop but you can't, and it takes you over. But then I was also thinking, metaphorically, it's kind of everyone's got an itch about something. There's something inside of everyone just eating away at them, and how sometimes it consumes you, whether it's your fears or your insecurities or whatever it is, jealousy, some crazy emotions. So I was looking at it like that, and those things come from inside, from your heart, your mind. So that I thought that would have played well with the concept of the itch. And we try so hard, right? Sometimes we try so hard to fight those emotions, but the more we fight them, the worse it gets.
Mhm.
Am I making sense, or is it just me?
Yeah, no, it makes
So,
sense.
and that's the manifestation of itch. It's like you get this virus, you try to stop the scratching, and then you scratch yourself, but the more you scratch, the worse it gets, and until you just can't, you're just consumed by it. So that was that metaphor. I'm surprised you got it. That's great. That's great. I thought that was just in my head while I was writing. I was like, this itch thing is, like when you write something, you're thinking something, and then you end up making something. So that's great that people are kind of connecting that. That's fantastic. Thank you.
But I should probably also note that my background is psychology. So
Yeah, yeah. I actually delved a lot into psychology. I read a lot of stuff about. I always tend to do a lot of research because I don't want to make some silly mistake and have a naive. Well, I'm sure I did in some aspects, but I want it to be as educated as possible on the subject matter. So I tried to do as much research as I could, humanly possible. So I got sick of it, and yeah, psychology was a big part of it. Just how people operate, how they think, and that plays with the characters as well. It's like they're all decent people, but they all make such bad decisions.
yeah.
And in trying to be good, it's you get in your own way, and it's your own thought process and the things that you do and you don't do. It's all there.
Mhm. So I have so many more things that I want to ask. Like I said at the beginning, I want to give people space to actually think through some of this and leave them wanting to ask even more questions themselves, and hopefully prompts more discussion on Discord. But there's one more that I really want to ask.
Yeah.
So you describe this movie as a frenzied self-destructive shelves of our former selves.
Yeah.
And this feels again not only a very emotional movie where you're trying to work through whatever this itch inside of you is, whatever this anger or trauma or whatever it is that you're trying to get out, you're trying to get out of your system without it hurting others. But along with it being a very emotional movie, it feels like a movie that has something to say. Now, I'm not asking you necessarily what the message is that you are trying to convey, but what message do you hope people get from Itch? Whether it's your intended message or not, what do you hope that they get from watching this movie?
It's never too late to try to correct some past errors, I think is the overarching theme. And I think if people can take that, we can't change the past, right? And we can't go back and change what we've done, but it's never too late to kind of own up to the present and see what mistakes we've made and see how we can reconcile and move forward with those experiences. It's if you're still breathing and above ground, you still got a shot. I think that's so yeah. There's always a glimmer of hope. If you're breathing and you're above ground, there's a glimmer. Just try to go that way.
Well, I think that's a wonderful message. And relating it to the movie, even if the hope isn't for yourself, hope in what you can do for others, I think is a very powerful message. Again, I love the movie. There's so much more that I want to talk about, but I also want to make sure that everyone has a chance to watch more CFF films. So let's go ahead and wrap things up so that people can get back to the movies. So where do you want people to either find you, whether it be in Discord or social media, or where can they find more information about Itch as it continues its festival run? So any of that social media or just online presence that you want to let people know about?
Yeah, you can follow. I put everything up on Instagram. I try to keep it in one place, so there's not too many different places to visit. Itch 2025 is the handle, so you can find out all the good stuff over there. And thank you so much for the thoughtful questions. I really enjoyed talking to you as well.
All right. Well, again, Bari, thank you so much for taking the time, and hope you enjoy the rest of CFF.
Thank you. Thank you.